The pre-dawn darkness of the airfield is not silent. It is filled with the frantic metallic cacophony of a desperate salvage operation. For 8 minutes, the scene focuses on the grueling labor of ground crews working under the dim hooded glow of flashlights. They move like ghosts through a graveyard of aviation. Mechanics with frost-bitten fingers use hand-cranked pumps to siphon the final liters of low-octane fuel from the wings of wrecked planes, machines that were shot to pieces the day before, to fill the tanks of the 40 that can still fly. The liquid is precious, treated with the reverence of holy water, yet the smell of it is sickly and pervasive, mixing with the scent of frozen mud and burnt rubber. The camera lingers on the physical toll of a lost war. A mechanic tries to patch a jagged shrapnel hole in a fuselage with a piece of scrap metal and a hand riveter. The metal doesn't quite match, a patchwork quilt of a dying Air Force. Tools slip from numb hands. There is no shouting, only the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of the rivets and the heavy breathing of men who haven't slept in 48 hours. Every few minutes they stop and look up, listening. The silence of the night is being eaten away by a distant, low-frequency throb, the sound of 10,000 cyclone engines warming up across the English Channel. It is a sound that vibrates in the teeth, a reminder that the clock is ticking toward a mathematical certainty. Inside the ready room, the atmosphere is heavy with the smell of stale tobacco and unwashed wool. The pilots sit in rows, but they do not look like the propaganda posters of the early war. Some are barely old enough to shave, their flight suits sagging on thin frames. They stare at a chalkboard where the numbers tell a brutal story. 40 versus 1,000 plus. One pilot meticulously polishes his goggles over and over, his hands shaking so violently that the glass clatters against the table. Another stares at a photograph of a woman and child, then slowly tucks it into his boot, as if burying it. There is no bravado here, only a hollow, wide-eyed realization of the scale of the coming slaughter. As the first gray light of dawn bleeds over the horizon, the sirens begin to wail, a long, mournful rise and fall that signals the radar stations have picked up the silver cloud. The pilots stand in unison, a slow and heavy movement. They walk toward their planes, not with the spring of heroes, but with the measured pace of men walking toward a scaffold. The ground crews finish their work, stepping back to watch the 40 engines struggle to turn over in the cold air. The airfield becomes a vortex of prop wash and dust. As the lead plane begins its takeoff roll, it passes the charred skeletal remains of the previous week's fleet, a grim gauntlet that ends in a gray, unforgiving sky. The act ends as the last of the 40 wheels leave the ground, the tiny formation disappearing into the vast empty belly of the clouds, heading toward a horizon that is already beginning to hum with the weight of the incoming invasion.
The ascent takes an agonizingly long time. For the first few minutes, the 40 German fighters are encased in a claustrophobic world of gray mist. The cockpits are freezing, frost creeps across the glass, and the pilots are isolated, seeing nothing but the dim glow of their instrument panels. The vibration of the engines is the only constant. Then they break through the ceiling of the clouds into a brilliant, blinding sunlight. Above them, at 30,000 feet, the sky has been transformed. It is no longer an open space, it is an industrialized corridor of metal. The silver cloud spans the entire horizon. The American B-17s are packed into tight combat boxes, staggered in height and depth to create a three-dimensional fortress of guns. The sheer scale is hypnotic, a river of silver aluminum that seems to have no beginning and no end. Condensation trails from over 4,000 engines weave a white artificial canopy over the continent. The German pilots look left, then right, finding only their tiny, tattered group of 40 against a wall of 1,000. For a moment, the air is eerily still, the only sound the high-pitched whine of the oxygen systems. The stillness shatters as the American escort fighters, the P-51 Mustangs, spot the intruders. From 5,000 feet above, hundreds of sleek silhouettes drop like hawks. The next 4 minutes are a blur of high-speed chaos. The German formation is instantly fractured. There is no dogfighting in the traditional sense. It is a desperate scramble for survival. The camera follows the perspective of a single German pilot as he tries to dive toward the bombers. Every time he levels his wings, a Mustang flashes across his vision, its 6.5 caliber machine guns stitching lines of fire across the sky. He watches a comrade's plane simply vanish, not exploding, but disintegrating into a cloud of confetti as it is caught in a crossfire of 20 different guns. The pilot finally reaches the box. As he nears the bombers, the sky turns black with flak, not from the ground, but from the defensive fire of the B-17s themselves. Each bomber is a porthole of spitting fire. The German pilot maneuvers through a hail of lead so dense it looks like rain falling upward. He fires his cannons at a lead B-17. He sees the 30mm shells strike the fuselage. He sees chunks of the tail fly off and an engine erupt in oily flames. But the bomber does not fall. It stays in formation. 2 other bombers move in to close the gap he created. It is a terrifying display of industrial resilience. The final minutes of the act are a montage of futility. German fighters are picked off one by one, falling away like burning leaves. For every American bomber that smokes or staggers, 10 more appear behind them, unbothered and relentless. The pilot realizes that even if he killed every man in the plane he was attacking, there are 10,000 behind them. The sky is vibrating with the sheer mass of the American war machine. As his own cockpit begins to fill with the smell of scorched wire and his ammunition drum runs dry, he looks up through his canopy. The silver wall hasn't slowed down, it hasn't diverted, it is moving with the cold, mechanical indifference of a landslide, crushing everything in its path.
The final 8 minutes begin with a sudden, jarring transition from the roar of combat to a haunting, mechanical silence. The pilot's engine, starved of oil and riddled with shrapnel, gives one final metallic shudder and dies. The violent vibration that has defined the last hour vanishes, replaced by the ethereal whistle of wind rushing over the cockpit glass. For the first 2 minutes, the camera remains inside the cockpit, capturing the pilot's heavy, ragged breathing. He is a ghost in a dead machine, suspended 5 miles above the earth. He watches his remaining fuel, mere drops, leak out across the wing in a shimmering, iridescent trail that is quickly lost to the slipstream. The perspective shifts to the world below. As the plane glides lower, the silver wall above becomes a distant, shimmering ceiling, but its impact is felt on the ground. The pilot looks down as the first wave of bombs reaches its destination. From 5 miles up, there is no sound of explosions, only the silent, rhythmic blossoming of fire across the landscape. It looks like a slow-motion infection spreading through the veins of the valley. Entire rail yards, factories, and city blocks are erased in ripples of dust and orange light. The sheer weight of the tonnage being dropped creates its own weather system. Huge columns of smoke rise like black towers, piercing the clouds and reaching up toward the pilot as he descends. The middle minutes of the act focus on the pilot's descent through the debris of a nation. He glides past charred fragments of silk parachutes, spinning pieces of aluminum, and the falling wreckage of both friend and foe. He passes through a layer of soot-stained clouds that smell of cordite and burning rubber. The ground rushes up to meet him, not the lush green Germany of his childhood, but a scarred lunar landscape of craters and jagged ruins. He sees a column of refugees on a dirt road, their tiny shadows scattering as his silent plane passes over them like a predatory bird that has lost its talons. In the final 2 minutes, the plane nears a makeshift landing strip, a flat stretch of farmland where a few ground crew members stand motionless. They don't run to meet him, they simply watch. The pilot doesn't have the hydraulic pressure to lower his landing gear. He prepares for a belly landing, the plane skidding through a field of winter wheat. The sound is a violent screeching scream of metal against earth, throwing up a rooster tail of dirt and stalks until the aircraft grinds to a halt in a cloud of dust. The pilot does not get out immediately. He sits in the quiet, shattered cockpit, looking through the cracked windscreen. High above, the hum of the 1,000 bombers is still audible, a faint, persistent drone that proves his sacrifice changed nothing. He watches the silver specks disappear into the eastern horizon, heading toward the heart of the Reich. He slowly unclips his oxygen mask, revealing a face aged a decade in a single morning. He steps out onto the soil, his boots sinking into the mud of a country that no longer has a sky. The screen fades to black as the distant thud of the bombs finally reaches his ears, a low, rhythmic heartbeat of a collapsing empire.
Mission complete. If this intel earned your respect, like and subscribe. Well done for finishing the file.